All right, we'll get started. Before we get started with the presentation, I will read the following land acknowledgement that was commissioned by the Denver Arts and Venue and the Denver American Indian Commission. We must acknowledge with respect as a non-native person that the land in which we stand, live, and learn is the traditional territory of the Ute, Cheyenne, and Arapaho peoples. We also recognize the 48 contemporary tribal nations that are historically tied to the lands that make up the state of Colorado. We must honor elders past, present, and future, and those who have stewarded this land throughout generations. We also recognize that the government, academic, and cultural institutions our nations were founded upon and continue to enact exclusions and erasures of Indigenous peoples. May this acknowledgement demonstrate a commitment to working to dismantle the ongoing legacies of settler colonialism, oppression, and inequities, and to recognize the hundreds of Indigenous nations who continue to resist, live, create, and uphold their sacred relations across their lands. We intentionally honor and celebrate the Indigenous communities in our city and express our gratitude for their ongoing contributions. The metropolitan area is historically and currently a major crossroads to the Indian country, and many nonprofits, businesses, and governmental organizations that play a key role in supporting our communities call our city home. But let's not forget that this land was theirs long before we made it ours. Welcome again to the Social Change Book Club, creating a responsible space to discuss community issues, as well as share innovative ways to engage our communities. At this time, the presenters will introduce themselves.
Hello, everyone. My name is Hong Ha. I am the Library Operations Manager for Santa Ana Public Library. Welcome.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jennifer Dewey, and I am an adult programming librarian at Denver Public Library. And thanks so much for being here with us today.
My name is Gregory Martin. I am a library assistant at the Rodolfo Corky Gonzalez branch for Denver Public Library.
Sorry about that. And finally, I am Nadia Evans. I am a reference librarian at the Blair Caldwell African American Community Research Library. All right, and we thank you all for being here. The agenda for the presentation is as follows. We will start with the origin of Rada, as well as talk about how we came up with the name. We'll be diving deeper into the committee and program model, as well as the program structure. We'll take a look at the past discussions and share what we learned along the way. We'll also share ways the program has evolved. And finally, we'll end with an opportunity for participants to ask questions. Just as a reminder, as questions come up for you, feel free to use the Q&A tool, and we'll be answering them in the order that they were received. Let's begin our discussion with the origin of Rada. This part of the presentation will highlight the internal and external motivations for the creation of the program. Early 2015, James and his colleague Evie had a series of conversations about the marches and the protests we were having in our city and around the nation against police brutality and the disregard for lives of Black people. In particular, we were seeing the death of at the hands of police of Mike Brown, of Eric Gardner, of Freddie Gray, and Sandra Bland. And we also saw the rise of the Black Lives Matter movement. At these meetings, James and Evie discussed their role as community members and the way they could contribute. At this time, both were reference librarians at the main branch of the Denver Public Library and encountered daily customers who wanted to talk about the violence in their communities. The basic reference interview quickly turned into impromptu venting sessions filled with frustration, anger, and hurt. With just a spark of an idea, the founders, Evie and James, knew it was important to understand they were part of the community, not just in the community. They knew the library couldn't remain neutral, but had to get involved somehow, some way. James and Evie invited members of the Denver Public Library's African American Planning Group and a few others to discuss the formation of a non-traditional book club with an emphasis on the social issues and the hope that the space could provide community members a meaningful way to address challenges facing communities of color through the vehicle of dialogue. This first meeting and many meetings after set the foundation for the committee and the overall program structure. I was one of those folks that were at this meeting and the series of meetings that followed over at least 2 months. And we really dived deep and explored, what the social book club would be, its purpose, what shape it would take, where exactly these programs would be held. We created a tentative timeline and also a list of themes and some books that might support those themes. Also keep in mind, we were working from zero budget. And so we had to also get creative on how we could create a program with no money. After a lot of meeting and a lot of discussion, we came up with the name and the mission. RADA stands for Read, Awareness, Dialogue, and Action. And our mission is we really want participants to read for social consciousness, to be able to exchange ideas at the program. And these ideas hopefully will promote discussion and through the books and the resources and community sharing that hopefully the programs generate. I'll hand it over to Greg, who's going to talk a little bit more about the Rada Model.
Thank you, Nadia. First of all, I apologize. I want to welcome everyone. I forgot to mention that when I introduced myself, but welcome and glad that everyone's here. So here we go with our Rada model. If we go to the next slide. What we do is we form a strong team and establish new roles, team roles, responsibilities, define the purpose. What we basically, when I first, before I joined RADA, well, I should say before the pandemic, the group would meet 3 or 4 times a month for about an hour or 90 minutes to discuss some of the rules and roles and responsibilities and what our topics are going to be. So for like group synergy and dynamics, we come up with big ideas and dreamers, realistic, logistical thinkers. We have a very talented group of people that are senior librarians, reference librarians, community development people, and then there's me. We come up with the administrative strategic plan thinkers, horizontal structure with both within our planning group and during book discussions. We have a diverse group of people from different ethnic groups, backgrounds, as well as religious backgrounds. So, everybody's involved, and we understand, how issues within, the community affects everyone. We, getting in buy-in from others, those who make the decision, programming, and public relations management. we, do outline programs, objective goals, evaluate methods, brainstorm topics. One of the things I love about this group is we get together at our meetings. I just started around the pandemic, and so I've been, doing the virtual meetings, but we brainstorms about what kind of topics that we want to discuss and how it's affected to keeping things together. One of the things that we did was on COVID-19 and systemic racism, a two-parter on that. We set firm deadlines and stick to them. We discussed, what topic, fits the topic. Like I said, for example, we did the COVID-19 and systemic racism. As for the situation for book club discussions, the books have to be published in the last 5 years. We have to have at least 3 or more copies available that's in our library system, and it's written in an accessible type of style. As for resources, we create our own. There's also like book websites, book clubs, Novelist Plus, academic scholars, YouTube. We do a lot of YouTube. For example, when we did the systemic racism and COVID-19, we did a video where we had the discussion about how African American men had this fear of wearing masks because of fear of what would happen if they would be approached by the police. And there have been other discussions, like authors, like, for example, Ta-Nehisi Coates would talk about his items and his books, and of course he gets a lot of questions about the case for reparation. For additional actions, at the end we like to invite after our book discussions, our book club discussions, or other discussions such as the COVID one that we had recently, we invite the customers to consider what actions will you commit to take. We like to, collect and share ideas for addressing issues in the community and things in the near future. One of the things, like when we were doing the COVID-19 and systemic racism, we came up with different kind of articles that we thought would be good. We all took a vote on which two that would work, but we also set aside other articles. So in case if you wanted to read more information on that subject, you were invited to do that. And we invite local, regional organizations to engage. I'm also a member of another group in my church that is involved in racial and social issues, and I happen to be the only African American group in the group. And they've had their book clubs and discussions. They had just finished doing White Fragility by Robin DiAngelo. And so I mentioned to the outgoing chairperson maybe the possibility of doing their next book club or book they should consider would be Me and White Supremacy by Layla Saeed. And so she was going to look into that, and I believe, which they did, they are doing it right now. And so I basically told them at the time that I recently joined RADA, and I was surprised that she was like, yeah, we know about RADA. And in fact, some of the ideas that RADA has been doing, we've been following that model as well. So just thought I would share that with you. And then there's we have, like at the end, we give an evaluation of what you thought of the book discussions or whatever discussions, we accept, whether it's positive feedback or negative feedback or things that we need to improve. And we respect and honor whatever, your opinions matter or your feedback matters.
Thanks, Greg. This next section, Greg talked about the model structure for both the committee and the program, and I'm going to talk a little bit more and share how we set up the responsible space for dialogue for our programs using an equation of safety, bravery, and responsibility. The RADA committee has adopted the mantra that we want our participants to become comfortable with being uncomfortable. And this means that we just want our participants to engage and not disengage when the topic starts to get a little uncomfortable, or they may kind of feel an emotional response to what is being talked about. In order to create this environment, we've developed a structure that normalizes intense conversations by establishing an environment that incorporates a discussion platform dedicated to ensuring participants feel that safety and the bravery, and that facilitators are accountable for the types of resources they provide. So safety is a safe environment means that we want participants to show up in their authentic selves, to share experiences and speak their truth. We're asking everyone to be brave in the space. And so we encourage everyone to actively listen, challenge personal complacency, and to confront personal bias. And the facilitators really take a serious responsibility in making sure the materials are vetted, the resources we shared are accurate and up to date. And then anybody that we might invite to our discussions, again, we're having them show up at the beginning or the end. They're not necessarily a part of the program itself, but they're there to share their resources. We make sure that those people are reliable and are sharing accurate information. The committee realized very early in the process of creating the program that we needed to have a set of group norms to reinforce that equation that we're trying to create of safety, bravery, and responsibility. The norms were created basically to maintain order, especially since some of the topics we discuss can be heavy and can encourage, maybe some debate at times. At each program, we make sure to read through the expectations, and those are the ones on the screen. We post them in the space so that we can always refer to them if we need to. We ask if anybody has any questions about the expectations, and we also ask if anyone in the space would like to add to the list of guidelines. We've also taken this a step further by asking at the beginning of programs to consider if this program is right for you. We also encourage participants to take a break if they're feeling overwhelmed or emotional during our programs. The most important part is to make sure, and we encourage people to take care of themselves, however that may look like. So if you need to take a break, if you maybe need to leave and maybe join us at another discussion, you're free to do that. But we just want to make sure that the program isn't interrupted or sidelined by individual emotional responses. Again, some of the topics that we talk about can be heavy, and they do bring up a lot of emotions for folks. So I wanted to mention we have a very unique way of kind of documenting our in-person discussions. We haven't used this method yet in any of our virtual programs, but we've used Chris Whitman, who's a strategic illustrator. She travels all over the country using her illustration method. And what she says is is she visually captures tangible and abstract concepts that allow groups to see their challenges and create a path forward. And so she has kindly donated her time and talent to illustrate 9 of our in-person discussions because she feels very strongly about the deep listening that the RADA programs encourage and the topics that we explore and the space that we give our participants to talk about. This method allows participants to speak freer. We're not documenting the discussion in any way. We consider it less intrusive and a very creative way of capturing the conversation. I'm going to show 2 examples of the illustrations in their finality. And you can imagine these, the illustrations are very large. So let me go to the next slide so you can see what I'm talking about. So our very first discussion was, we read and talked about the book, The New Jim Crow. And, you know, you can't see the scale, but this is a very large piece of paper. And that the way Chris captured the concepts and the comments kind of played like in the middle of the paper and then kind of spread out into like to cover the entire discussion. The second book the latest book discussion we had, this is pre-COVID, we read Proud, My Fight for an Unlikely American Dream, and both facilitators are pictured in this photo. And again, it's a similar way of kind of capturing the conversation where Chris is highlighting the high-level concepts in the book, as well as the comments and feedback from the participants. All right.
Thanks, Nadia. I'm going to talk a bit about the titles that we've done for RADA workshops and the things that we have learned along the way, which are many and still continue. Next slide. So like Nadia said, and that you just saw the illustration, the first RADA discussion happened in October 2015. The title was The New Jim Crow by Michelle Alexander. The themes of this book are race, discrimination, African-American prisoners, criminal justice, and how the criminal justice systems in America function as a contemporary system of racial control. So this discussion, we had over 40 attendees, which we considered a great success. And in the next slide, I'll talk about some of the things that we learned. So first of all, RADA programs are a little bit different than regular book clubs, and they're also not typically author discussions. So we find it's really helpful to be clear in our promotion, kind of what RADA discussions are, so that people who do come know what they're getting into. We also decided that introducing 40 people one at a time going around takes a really long time. And even if you have just 10 people, individual introductions can take a big chunk of your programming time away. So we don't do individual introductions of participants anymore. The next point might be obvious, that facilitators have to have read the book, but they also have to be involved from the start in creating our discussion outline and questions. It helps with the next bullet point so that facilitators can kind of be prepared for questions that they might anticipate, especially challenging questions, so that they can kind of be ready for those. And like we discussed earlier, having our discussion guidelines up is key, because we always say being clear is being kind. So we post those, we actually go through and read them all together as a group and have everyone agree to them during the program. So those can be customized to your group. They can be brief too, but just have those posted and have everyone agree to them. We also found, and you might have found too from hosting public programs, that people love to have something that they can take away with them. So even a handout whether that be of a reading list or additional resources or even the outline of your program. People like to have that to take with them and take notes on at the program too. We also wanted to note that the topics that RADA chooses are always timely and we consider them really important, but you don't have to start with the absolute most controversial topic out there. It's totally okay to kind of ease your way in, and you can kind of, your community, and so choosing that, you can kind of be mindful of where you're at. And as we said before, Hadia went into this in a little more detail, snacks and breaks. Everyone loves snacks, but they're not just serving the purpose of making everyone comfortable, which they do. It also gives people a chance to get up, move around. We always let people know that they're welcome to get up during the discussion and go outside of the room or show them where the restroom is, just so that if they need space to process. So I'm going to go through the books that we've read quickly and share a few anecdotes of the discussions that we've hosted. So one of the first books we did was The Griots of Oakland, Voices from the African American Oral History Project from Angela Zussman, which featured young African American men in Oakland, California, and they talked about their daily life, their dreams and hopes for the future. For this discussion, one of our founding members, James Davis, who's here. Thanks, James, for running the background today to make this possible. He reached out to several students in a mentoring organization that he was part of to invite them to this discussion. And I bring this up because RADA tries to actively engage with youth, not just adults in our community too. We reach out to our teen advisory boards, which are teen groups at several of our branch locations here at Denver Public Library. And we also have reached out to teachers and contacts at local schools as well. The Griots of Oakland, the author, Angela Zussman, actually learned about the talk before it happened, and she was able to Skype in to join in that program. It's not typical that we host authors, but we did that time, and it did affect some of the feeling of the discussion. Some of the teens were uncomfortable talking, but it ended up working out well, and they sort of relaxed and were able to ask questions. We also did Americana by Chimamanda Ngozi Adichie. It's a novel. Most of our books are nonfiction, but we have done a couple of fiction books too. And this one is about two Nigerians making their way in the US and the UK. And it discusses themes of immigration, race, belonging, and search for identity and home. Losing My Cool by Thomas Chatterton Williams discusses race and class, pop culture, and race identity. The Price of Silence by Liza Long touches on themes of mental health, psychology, and children with mental disabilities. The American Way of Poverty by Sasha Abrams discusses poverty, equality, politics, and policy. All American Boys by Jason Reynolds and Brendan Kiley is also another fiction book that we did. RADA chose it because of its popularity and timeliness. It was a special RADA program because rather than just a discussion, we actually partnered with local independent bookstore Tattered Cover to host both authors in a discussion. We had over 100 participants, and the authors, Reynolds and Kiley, were great facilitators and made a really deep, meaningful conversation possible. And the themes of this book focus on racism, police brutality, and privilege. Okay. The Bridge to Brilliance by Nadia Lopez. Nadia Lopez is a founding principal of Mott Hall Bridges Academy in Brooklyn, and they are a model for quality education that includes a safe, nurturing, and innovative learning environment. Just Like Us by Helen Thorpe is the true story of 4 Mexican-American young women coming of age in Denver, Colorado. 2 of them have legal documentation and 2 of them do not. It was also interesting because at the time Helen Thorpe wrote this, she was also married to John Hickenlooper, who was the mayor of Denver at the time. How to Kill a City by Peter Moskowitz discusses gentrification, equality, and the urban poor. I forgot to mention earlier too that we let people know that they don't have to have read the book necessarily to come and participate in the conversation. So that's another thing you can mention to customers and community members that you'd like to have attendees. So The Body is Not an Apology by Sonia Renee Taylor. In 2011, Taylor founded The Body is Not an Apology as an online community. It celebrated radical self-love and body empowerment, and it became kind of a framework for that movement. White Rage by Carol Anderson reframes the conversation around race and chronicles the forces, the powerful forces opposed to Black progress in America. And Dreamland, The True Tale of America's Opiate Epidemic by Sam Quinones is an account of addiction in the heartland in America and goes from small towns in Mexico to boardrooms of big pharma discussing that topic. All right, and so the last two books before 2020 hit all of us. The first one is about ageism, and it's This Chair Rocks by Ashton Applewhite. We hosted this as a regular Rada discussion, and the author was also in Denver to do an author talk. So we ended up doing two programs, which I think was really beneficial. We did a regular Rada discussion, so we were able to kind of unpack themes around ageism through that. And then we also hosted a separate author visit with Ashton Applewhite. And the last book that we have read was Proud, My Fight for an Unlikely American Dream by Ibtihaj Muhammad. And Ibtihaj Muhammad was the first Muslim American woman in a hijab to compete for the United States in the Olympic Games. And it talks about her challenges and the discrimination that she faced along that path. So those are the books we read. We're going to share the list of books with you too. I'm not sure if we'll do that in the chat, but we'll get you a document that lists all of those books that you can refer back to. And I'm going to turn it over to Hong.
Thank you, Jen. So in this section, I am going to talk about the evolution of Rada. So Rada started as a community conference. Can you go to the next slide, please? Thank you. So Rada started as a community conversation program using books, but we have since expanded to include creating workshops and tools for staff and patrons. So in 2000. In 2018, during a discussion on the book White Rage by Carol Anderson, participants expressed the need for tools to empower them when confronted with situation of macro and microaggressive behavior rooted in racism. So we responded by creating a workshop to address the many layers of racism and white supremacy. We piloted the workshop at the same branch where we had the book discussion and focused on macro and microaggressions using personal examples and scenarios shared by attendees. The workshop also covered ways to disrupt bystander behavior and empower participants to actively engage as upstanders. To combat these type of aggressive situations found in public spaces, business, and professional settings. And we had about 25 attendees, and it was really well received. Next slide, please. So for the next workshop, Denver Public Library's Children's Department reached out to us with a specific request to create a 4-part series that tackles how to talk to kids about race. The series provides context and tools on the topic of confronting personal bias, systemic racism, racism in the media, and microaggressions, which is in our upcoming workshop. Of course, for all the workshops, we created lists of resources for attendees to take and to read up on things, and then just for something to continue their learning. Next slide, please. So COVID, like everyone else, we had to stop in-house programming. But at the same time, we were living, we were working, we were struggling through the pandemic. So RADA team decided to create an online workshop for library staff on the topic of COVID-19 and its impact on our work and home life and in our community. So part one of the workshop focused on the workplace, specifically the hustle culture, its unrealistic expectations, and how harmful it is to staff's well-being. We made sure to include in this workshop tools and resources for self-care and resiliency. And then we had to do part two, of course. Part two was about health disparities and the disproportionate impact of COVID-19 on Black and Brown communities. And for these workshops, we assign articles and short videos as pre-work or homework assignments before we meet in the large group setting for discussions. We also use the Zoom platform so that we can support small group discussion. The great thing about working as a team is that we were able to have two facilitators, like the main facilitators for the workshop, but then we also have enough members to facilitate individual small group session as well. And the workshop was really well received by staff. And one of the questions was like, how do we address Zoom bombing? Well, we haven't had a workshop, online workshop for the public yet. When we closed down, we basically turned inward and created workshops for staff members who are experiencing COVID in a variety of ways. Let's see. So right now, because I think because of the timeliness of the topics that we presented to our organization, RADA team has been very popular. Not sure what we're gonna do next, but we've been very popular the way we produce these workshops and how I think they're really quality workshops because we have a whole group of team putting our head together to produce the RADA style of producing workshop and programs. So the reason why we share with you this section about workshops and how we evolve through the pandemic is because you can adapt the Rada model to different types of programming, from book discussions to workshops to staff development, in person and online. Next slide, please. And now we'd like to share with you the testimony from a city librarian, Denver Public Library, Michelle Jeske. The RADA program is a stellar example of using insight gained from our community engagement, deep listening work done neighborhood by neighborhood to determine hyperlocal topics of concern and interest for dialogue at a branch library. The fact that the topic and dialogue are based around a book makes it even more exciting. I'm very proud of the work of the RADA team. Now, to get endorsement from your city librarian is awesome. So we just want to share that with you. Can you go to the next slide, please? And now in this area, we want to share with you why we're part of the RADA team. The three of us, presenter, myself, Jen, and Greg, we're fairly new members of RADA. For me, I joined around April when we closed down because of the pandemic. And I have been admiring the RADA team from afar. And I thought, like in the back of my mind, that we as library staff we also need a responsible space to discuss community issues. I was a member of the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee at the time, and part of our overall goal was to create an inclusive workplace at the Denver Public Library. But in order for us to do our work, we also need to have the space to talk about, topics that affects us. And Rada Model and the Rada team, the workshop that they were producing for the community was so relevant to the work that we do in as part of our Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee. So I joined Rada to support them, but the great thing about Rada Model is that you contribute what you can. So you can contribute your skills. You don't have to do everything because we work as a team. So we have members who are great with doing the research, great as, putting the slide presentation together, who are great with writing the promotional materials. So as a group, we piecemeal involvement, but it produced this quality holistic program. So that's my testimony.
So I joined RADA in early 2019. So I was only part of it for about a year before everything shut down. I also, like Hong, was admiring RADA's work from afar and was really curious about their collaborative and non-hierarchical planning, and also about, like Hong mentioned, being able to meet staff where they were, who could contribute what they could at that whatever point they were at in their professional life. And at the time when I joined, DPL, Denver Public Library, was expanding services and programs for older adults. And I also wanted to ask Rada if they were interested in hosting that discussion on ageism. And I was really happy that that happened, but I was also really glad to see the process of kind of choosing the book and working together. And, everything is kind of done by consensus, and everyone provides ideas to come together to make these amazing programs. And I feel really lucky to continue to be able to work with them. So that's why I started with Rada.
For me, actually, it was a coworker that I was sharing something that that happened. It was a situation that happened with my granddaughter. My granddaughter's with my daughter down in Alamosa, Colorado. My daughter's attending, is going to school, trying to get her degree. And my granddaughter was upset. She was being teased about her hair because the town that she's in, there's not that very few African Americans down there. And so my daughter was a little bit upset about it, and I was sharing the information with my coworker about it. And so she started giving me certain kind of informations, and I was also telling her at the time about the group that I was involved with my church. And she mentioned to me, "Have you heard about Rada?" And I said, "No, I didn't." So she was giving me some of the examples of some of the informations that Rada has done. And so there's an old saying that sometimes if there's you don't need to look for your purpose in life, it will find you instead. So when it was time for me to make my plans for my goals this coming year and stuff, I asked I told my supervisor that I would like to consider joining Rada, and so he informed Hadia. Hadia and I spoke, and I attended the first meeting, and I never looked back.
Thank you, Hong, Jen, and Greg, for sharing. your testimonies on why you were attracted to join RADA and why you continue to participate. We have a list of resources, and Jen mentioned the books that we have created programs around are on that list. I'm not sure if we're going to send it out or put it in the chat. So yeah, let me know because we can do that, I believe. And then we also have time for questions. And James is going to facilitate this part of the presentation. So if you have questions or you added a question, we'll go through and answer them. And if there's something comes up, please feel free to add questions as we go along.
Well, thank you, everyone. Awesome job, team. I did put the, tell me if you see the resources in the chat. I just put it in the chat. I will do it again to make sure that you get it. So let me see if that's going to everyone. Give me just a second. Let me try that again one more time. Okay, so there's the link to the resources, to the books, and a little bit more about the Rada model. So just I have a few questions to you guys, and whoever wants to answer that, that's fine. So the first question came in was, how did you decide on the limit of books published in the last 5 years? I believe that was heard also in the presentation. Nadia, did you want to answer that one?
Sure. So one of our selection criteria is that we want books published within the last 5 years. The idea is to present the most up-to-date information. And so once we have a selection of books that meet that criteria, we vote on them. So create like a simple Google form so that we can choose, I think, the top 2 choices out of that list of books that we have selected. So hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, it's that 5-year period, but we also go the step further. And then as a group, we vote on our top selections. And usually the top or the winning choice is easily identified once we vote.
Thank you. And then we have another question that was concerning submitting a book for review to this program. And if you don't mind, I'll answer that. We normally we do get suggestions for books to read, sometimes from various people, and the way that's not how we do our decision-making process. Our decision-making process is based on the community need. So we really look at issues that the community is struggling with. We come back and we dialogue as a group, and then we look at those resources that fit that need. So sometimes we may have someone who says, hey, this would be a great book for RADA. And then we just remind them that the way that we select our books is according to the community need, what the community is grappling with at that point. The other thing I have here, Nadia, had to do with the feedback form that you showed. Somebody wanted to see that again. They wanted you to see if you can share that with you. I don't know if we have that separate from the slide, the presentation, the slide decks, but we can probably add that. And I think Nadia, and we can talk a little bit more about the RADA kit toolkit that's coming up, and that would be a part of that toolkit.
Yeah, that's no problem. I can add that slide and the image to the resource list.
Second thing is, how did you solicit the ideas and commitments from participants regarding what their next action items will be? Do you want to answer that, anyone?
I just want to say it's all voluntary. And so all of us as a team, we basically, some of us volunteer for things we're comfortable in doing or we have time to do. And so that's why the team model or the Rada model is so important, that like you don't have to do everything, and everything that we do is voluntary. So we have enough people with very interest, very like time commitment and experience and skills to support what we need to do.
Can I say something? Like for example, like when we were talking about the COVID, you know, like there were, like I said, I mentioned earlier, there were like two articles or something that we decided to stick to, but everyone else contribute other articles in there, and we just you know, everyone is each trying to help each other and support each other, you know, when we try to do these presentations. And I think that's what's so great is about the support and encouragement from everyone in this group.
Thank you, Greg. The next question is, you're having a positive response with people confronting personal bias. I think this is my primary concern. For the most part, people are very respectful, but wondering how heated discussions can be if you've had a higher level of anxiety and anger, our anger come through. And if you don't mind, Nadia, I can answer that one. At our first discussion was the new Jim Crow. That was the beginning of Rada, and we got into mass incarceration, and the discussion got pretty heated at some point. The participant actually stood up and they began kind of talking back and forth at each other. And what we did was we reminded them of our agreement, our dialogue agreement that we listed in terms of being respectful, in terms of listening to others and considering their ideas. And the person kind of stopped at his tracks when I pointed out the agreement, and he said, "Oh, I'm sorry." And he says, "And you're right." So he actually, you know, sat down and let the discussion continue. Then after the full discussion, him and the other gentleman, they got together and they had a nice dialogue between each other on their own. So it worked out when you know, when we as a group sit and we agree on how we will dialogue and how we will actually operate in that space. And slides, Nadia, the next question is on slides and recording. Will that be available?
Yes, we'll also put the slide PDF in the resource list.
Yeah.
So, example, the picture image of the evaluation as well as the slides will be there.
Okay. All right. And so that answers a few of those questions. How often does these discussions take place? Anyone can answer that?
I'll jump in. So to go back, the original idea was to have the in-person discussions monthly. And then we realized quickly that that may not be the best use of our time, as well as give participants a chance to read the books, get the books. And so we really try to think about the timing of the year. We learned summers aren't the best times to have discussions. And so we've kind of limited them to like early spring and fall. And so that from that kind of, from moving from that example, they usually shake out to be about maybe 3 to 4 discussions for the entire year. And again, we want to give people a chance to get the book, read the book if they want to, and then also give us a chance of getting the word out, promoting the programs, and then creating all of the resources and discussion questions that are part of those programs.
Thank you. The other question I believe Hong answered about controlling Zoom bombing. Most of our work had been in-person meetings. So the Zoom situation is kind of new to Rada. So we are, and like Hong was saying, our first Zoom presentation was actually to staff at Denver Public Library. And that was a pretty controlled environment. I mean, obviously, it had to do with internal staff, and it wasn't a Zoom link that went out to anyone and where anybody could just log on. So yeah, so we'll be interested to see how we, and just like now, this is a Zoom, but because the best way to handle Zoom is actually have people sign up for the webinar rather than just have an open link. So, and then the other one is, did participants find the presence of Chris Whitman uncomfortable or distracting? And how are these comparable services from other sources like graphic recording? So Chris Whitman, she volunteered her time. And the thing with Chris Whitman is she actually comes in as a participant. We tell all the participants beforehand that we are going to have a graphic illustrator, strategic illustrator, and we ask about if they're comfortable with it. Generally, they say they are. We only do that for book discussions. We do not do that for workshops. So we have not had Chris Whitman illustrate workshops because it's more of a personal and it's more confidential. And we want it to remain so, and we want things to be uninhibited in terms of open discussions. Will you be making the PowerPoint? We answered that one. Let's see here. We got a few more minutes. We got at least one more minute. Some of these questions we will have to kind of refer back to. Thank you for the great presentation. Our city staff invited to participate in the discussions. They have to have their own discussions. How did you train the facilitators? Nadia, do you want to answer that?
Sure. So like Jen and Hong mentioned, the committee has a wide variety of skill sets. And so anybody who would like to develop those skills or have those skills as a facilitator are welcome. And so we rotate the facilitation duties, and we always have two. So there's always a co-facilitator to support the facilitation as well as the question creation and managing the discussion. And so it just depends on if you're comfortable and if you're interested and you want to facilitate, you have those skills, or you want to like expand those skills. We do have some resources in our resource list that are helpful for learning how to facilitate discussions, gaining those skills, improving those skills. And so I would encourage you to look and check those resources out. But again, it's all voluntary and it's all based on your personal preference and abilities. And they rotate. We don't ever rely heavily on just the same couple people. You know, anybody is able to do it.
And then obviously wouldn't be able to get to all the discussions. I do have a discussion that maybe Jen or Greg or Hong can answer, and it's actually concerning the culture of DPL. It says, do you feel that the internal work culture has improved around EDI as a result of RADA, and are workshops that were being held?
Like everyone else, I'm relatively new, but where I work at, I think there have been other group members that have been interested in, that have attended the RADA discussions, and I think that has helped a lot with the what's going on at my branch. When we've had the discussions and there have been some other situations, I think there are some people that still have, there's that lack of awareness, but I think they're now beginning to understand after, what RADA has done for the branch and the library as well. So I feel that there's something positive that's coming since I've been here.
I would like to add to that. I can't say for sure whether or not it has improved the culture around EDI, but I can say, like, since we have started doing the staff workshops, the awareness, because we're a really big system. We have 26 locations. not all staff necessarily knew what RADA was all about. And so since doing the staff workshops, I think awareness of RADA has increased. And so including staff, even if it's a public program, is worthwhile too, because you're going to find that people are interested in the topics and then can maybe potentially support that work going forward too.
Yeah, I agree with the, I think I can't say anything about, it's too soon to say that it's helping the internal culture of Denver Public Library. However, the conversation that we're having, it has broadened the conversation and the discussion and things we talk about as library staff. And so I see that for sure.
Thank you. And then we're going to do our last question. And the last question has to do with special considerations you would recommend for implementing this in school libraries. We are working on a toolkit to implement the RADA model at school libraries or in anything, as Hong had mentioned. This could be actually operate in any circle or any organization. So if you are interested in more about the RADA model, I have put and there it is, both in the chat, RADA at Denver Public Library, and I'm sorry, I put that wrong. It's RADA at denverlibrary.org. So let me put the right one in the chat. So if you need to reach out to us, please do so concerning resources or concerning another meeting or presentation, we can do that. So it's RADA at denverlibrary.org. I'm gonna put it back in your hands, Hadia. We want to thank everyone for joining, and I will put it back in Hadia's hands. And thank you all for joining. Go, Hadia.
Again, thank you for spending your afternoon with us. We appreciate you and your questions. Anything we didn't make it to as far as questions, we will have that in the resource list toward the end. Again, we'll have the slides available for review and our evaluation methods as well. So again, thank you for joining us. We appreciate you and your questions. Hope everyone has a wonderful rest of their day.